Here we are at DesignCon in San Jose, and with me today is Josh. Welcome.
Hey Chuck, good to be here.
So you're leading the charge at Omdia for AI and IoT. Tell me about that.
I am leading that charge. Yes, we have a great research team on the AI and IoT side, 12 really great experienced analysts with decades of experience in the industry. Many of them have worked for key industry players, so they have that perspective as well. So yeah, it's a great team and a very exciting area to lead.
So what are some of the things that they look at?
We look at everything. I mean, we are certainly trying to identify key trends in these industries, how those are impacting the future of the market. We look at everything from the hardware development that's impacting both of these spaces, to software and services that are obviously a key component, all the way to the end applications and the vertical markets that these technologies are being applied into.
So are they specific? So one analyst does this, another analyst does that?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, we do, a lot of our analysts, as I said, are very experienced and they have spent years in the industry and they have, you know, that larger, wider perspective. But yeah, certainly we do have experts based on their background that focus on something specific. So I know you've talked to some of our IoT hardware experts that focus on the component sector, for instance. We would have other experts in our area that would focus on IoT platforms and software platforms and things of that nature. So yeah, we do try to have the analysts do have some specific focuses, but at the same time, they can really speak to the entire market.
So can you talk a bit about the kind of the integration of AI and IoT just as technologies?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think AI and IoT by themselves, they're transformative technologies. They're changing the way we live, they're changing the way businesses operate. And we're certainly, but we're really seeing the greatest impact is when these technologies converge and come together, and their impact becomes even more profound. And you know, this isn't unusual for technology. You think about our smartphones, all the different technologies that have come together over the last couple of decades that create this thing that we now have in our pockets. You know, advances in computing, advances in telecommunications, and we see a similar trend with AI and IoT, and they are complementary technologies. You know, IoT, you know, there's billions of devices out there gathering an incredible amount of data, and that by itself is useful. But it's really when you can make sense of that data and identify trends, anomalies, and other patterns where that you can really have the greatest impact, and that's where AI comes in. AI can obviously allow for that, and I think that's where we're seeing these technologies come together. You know, there's some real world examples. Think of autonomous vehicles. Yeah, a connected car is essentially an IoT device that has IP addressable. But when you add AI into that, you can allow for these vehicles to operate, you know, without human interface. It's really these types of examples that we're starting to see, and we certainly expect more in the years to come in areas like industrial and healthcare and many other areas.
So what are the big verticals where these industries are converging?
Yeah, I think I mentioned you know, the vehicles and automobiles. I think is where the one that will probably most consumers will experience today, but or in the near future. But certainly areas like healthcare, there's some really interesting examples, things that have really been hastened by the developments in the world over the last 18 months with the pandemic, where we're seeing a lot wider application of IoT and AI to treat and to ensure, you know, quality healthcare. And then industrial, obviously. I think that's a really interesting space that we're seeing a lot of activity in, and you bring in other transformative technologies like 5G into that discussion and it becomes really, really interesting.
So you mentioned the pandemic. What have you seen for market changes, if at all, during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, and you know, there was a certain amount of uncertainty for all of us and when this situation started, and would it sort of slow adoption of things like IoT and AI applications by enterprises, and maybe immediately it did, certainly everyone maybe took a pause, but what we've seen since then is really an acceleration of those deployments by enterprises. And I think the key is that both of these technologies are central to the digital transformation that really has been hastened by the pandemic. And we see a lot of enterprises accelerating or starting new solution deployments because of this.
With all these connected devices, if IoT existed and AI did not exist, would AI have to have been created because of so much data?
Yeah, I mean it's very logical. Yeah, I mean you could certainly make that argument that this the creation of this big data, this billions of endpoints of sensors collecting this data, required some sort of intelligence like that to manage it, because it's simply not doable by us alone, by humans alone. So that's why I said that they're very complementary. And of course, not only does AI strengthen an IoT solution, IoT strengthens AI. The more data allows these algorithms to be created quicker and with greater accuracy. So again, they're very, very complementary to one another.
Is it basically that humans can't keep up?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, again, you're talking about billions of endpoints. We're talking about 75 billion installed base of IoT by 2030. It's hard to imagine any human being able to kind of make sense of that data, and it's just, the amount of data is just, yeah, it's hard to comprehend for us on a human
And will
mind.
companies be able to trust the data at the end?
That's the thing. I mean, and I think the more data you have, the greater trust you can have in it, right? Again, the ability for the IoT to kind of give this incredible amount of data and strengthen the AI, processes put into place is certainly. I think we're going to have to trust it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chuck.
That was excellent.